Let's talk about forming your record label. Now, many of you, and I think I've asked you this at the beginning of the semester, are artists, songwriter artists or musicians, or someone who just wants to put out your own recording because you either do spoken word or comedy or you're in a band, but you have two different copyrights. As a songwriter or as a writer in general, you own that C circle copyright. However, once you put it into a recording format, there's the P circle copyright. And this is the one copyright that a record label owns and controls. So if you're an artist and you're interested in putting out your own material, you're actually putting out your own record label. You're starting a new business as a record label. And what I would recommend that you do, if you're an artist or if you're a musician or if you're a writer and you're doing your own recording, that you think about wearing a different hat. You've got a different hat that you're going to be wearing. Maybe when you write the song, you're a songwriter. You got the songwriting hat on. Once you get into the studio, maybe you have your musician hat on or your producer hat on. But once you have that final product done, being a demo or a master, and hopefully it's going to be a master for the purposes of a record label. And your plan is to get that product into the market. So you hope to get it up online for downloads or for streams and make some money off that recording. That's really the function of a record label. And what I would think that you might want to do is to start thinking about putting on that record label executive hat when you notice that your job responsibilities have changed from that of a songwriter or as a musician or as a producer, and now you're doing the functions of a record label. With that in mind, you've got to think about starting up a whole new company, and that being the company of a record label. So forming a label and selling music is actually doing the business. So you need to take care of some basics to make this business successful. First of all, decide what type of business formation to use. Either you're a sole proprietor, you're a partnership, or you're a corporation. I would think that eventually, if you were to sell this record label, you're going to need to be a corporation. You can be the others, but there's risk involved. So for our purposes of this class, I'm going to steer you toward thinking that you are a company, corporation, an LLC, limited liability corporation. If you're a sole proprietor, you own the whole ball of wax. You have all the responsibilities as the owner of the company. You have all the expenses as the owner of the company, but you also have all the risks. As a partnership, you have the risk. It's the same as a sole proprietor, except now you have a partner and you have the risks of that partner. As a corporation, you form an LLC, a limited liability corporation. That means your liability is limited to the amount of money that you put into the company. If something were to go wrong, you could always file bankruptcy for the company. You wouldn't lose all your personal assets and so forth that go along with a sole proprietor or partnership. So something to consider is forming one of these three, and I'm going to hopefully steer you toward thinking that you are a limited liability corporation. If you were to register with the state of Ohio for any one of these three, it's still $100. Okay, so if it's the same price, why not go with the corporation? Okay, we talked about this a little bit last week. The next thing is design a good name, and then with the name, a good logo. And I think one of the assignments that you have this week is to look over the logos. Do a Google search for record company logo and click on images. And you'll need to establish a graphic identity of whom you are or who the record label is. That graphic identity is done through your logo. A few minutes ago, we were looking at all the different record labels that are affiliated with the majors. And if you noticed, every one of them had a logo. You're going to be doing the same thing. So you'll need to come up with a good name for the company that's never been used anywhere in the world, and then start thinking about a logo. Now, it's not necessary at this point, but I would like you to start thinking about a logo. And I can also say that the longer the name is, the harder it is to come up with a good logo. So try and come up with something that's short. Universal is short. Warner Brothers is a little longer, but if you notice their logo, it was a W and a B. So these are things that you just need to think about when you're starting to form your record label. Okay, so then you're going to need a business license from your county. If you're going to be selling music locally, typically a record label will need a license from the county. I think in the Cuyahoga County, if that's where you are, it's $25. Not a big deal. But this is so you can register with them, because you do need to register your company with the state. You do need to get a federal tax ID number with the IRS. And with that, you'll be able to get a bank account. But then once you start selling that, you're going to need a business license from the county. So with your bank account, you'll be able to accept money now as a business. Now, if you open up a bank account with a local bank or a credit union, I would recommend that you request a debit card. And then any expenses that you have in the music industry that you put on that debit card. And it all runs through the business. As you may or may not know, all expenses with a business are tax deductible. So you'll be able to write off all of your expenses within the industry. So if you have to buy a new mixer or a new recorder or a new microphone, all of these things can be run through the record label, and you can write these off as an expense of the company. In order to do that, you got to have a bank account, and then when you get the bank account, make sure that you request a debit card, and then make all of your purchases with that debit card. Don't make any personal expenses from out of your own pocket. Keep the debit card for when you need it, and all of your expenses will go on that, including your website, your web hosting, and all equipment that you're going to use. With this and the debit card, you're going to print up some business cards and maybe some stationery, but some business cards for sure. You want to put the logo on the card. You want to put your name, address, phone number, email, contact information, web address, those kind of things. I would also recommend that you put a QR code either on the front or on the back of the business card so that someone with a smart device can scan it and go right to your website. That would be necessary. As far as stationery goes, it's not as necessary anymore, because with your printer, you can print the stationery right on there at the same time that you're printing a letter or so forth. So it's not as necessary. It depends on how much quality you want to put across. If you want it embossed, for example, you will need stationery. Okay. Also part of forming a record label would be to form a barcode. Get some barcodes for your label or your product, and you will need to do this through the barcode company down in Dayton, Ohio, and that will help you with identification of your products. Now, depending on where you're selling these products, now if you're doing physical product, you're going to need a barcode, but if you don't, if you're doing downloads and streams only, which is what I told you last week of what we're trying to get into was a digital record label, you won't have any physical product. You will only have digital product, and therefore you don't need these because a UPC code can be a little expensive for you. And then you're going to need to find, depending on what type of label you're going to need to find a brick and mortar retail outlet or online distribution. And your online distribution can be with more than one. So obviously iTunes would be a part of this. You're definitely going to want to have an account with iTunes and let them distribute your recordings. And you might want to get one with CD Baby or TuneCore or The Orchard, or there's a couple other ones that do online distribution of music. And Spotify, for example, is distributing music through streaming. So you're going to need to find that, get that set up for your company. All right, and then identify the need. Get to know the marketplace and find out what's out there. So search Yahoo or Google or Bing, search the web for what you are offering as a record label. Who are your competitors? Who are your potential customers? What's the culture of the music that you're going to be distributing and recording? You got to know these things in order to compete the best way possible. Okay? Also, determine what you have to offer that's different. If you're just like everybody else, you're not going to go very far. You have to be different. You have to always have quality, first of all, but you have to be different. Perhaps there's a new style of music that you want to release and you want to capitalize on, become the king of your own hill. For example, punk music or reggae music or new wave music. They were new and different from what was the genre at the time. And then you're going to be developing a business plan. Now, hopefully your business plan is going to be related to a digital label. We're talking about a finance plan and a sales plan, a competition plan, advertising plan, marketing plan, promotion plan, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of little plans that you'll be putting into this. Okay, so you're going to need to assemble some equipment. So for example, if you're going to be a digital label, you have to have a URL. Well, you can buy URLs for about 10 bucks. But it also means that you're going to need either some software to help you build your website, or you're going to need to know some coding. And the coding would be as basic as HTML, but these are some things that you're going to need to think about when you're putting together your equipment to form your record label. Obviously, you might need some recording equipment and some microphones. However, not necessarily. If you're just a record label and not a recording company, a record label can do the recording at a third-party recording studio. And therefore, you don't need the equipment to do the recording because the recording studio has that equipment. You don't necessarily need a microphone because the recording studio has microphones. But there are certain things that you're going to need for your record label as far as equipment goes. I would recommend a MacBook for one. And that way, because you're going to need a computer one way or the other. And for the music industry, the MacBook would be a good choice. So you will need to construct a website, and you might want to hire someone to do this for you, or you might want to come up with a page on your own and then start building other pages that people can hyperlink to, or that you can hyperlink to. At least learn some basics about putting together the website. You will also need a system to process some sales. So people that are buying from you online, first of all, want to make sure that their information that they're providing to you is secure. So http://www.yourrecordlabel.com is not secure. If it says https://www.yourrecordlabel.com, it is secure. So the S on the end of an HTTP signifies to the search engines and to others that it's a secure account. I still don't trust it. So you might want to make sure that you have some built-in security by accepting credit cards and a cart that people can upgrade, and you can download from that. You can select different items that you'll be offering for sale from your website and put them into a cart. And then, of course, you're going to need bookkeeping. Well, the bookkeeping is really simple if you use that debit card, because now you get a monthly statement and it shows you where all your expenses are. So this is what I use, and it makes it a lot easier for me and my accountant because I can just print out these month-to-month statements and it shows all of my expenses and all of my income. And that's my bookkeeping. So that's what I use. I don't know if all banks do this. I use a credit union, and the credit union has the capability of setting up different accounts within the main account, and I use those for projects. So I have multiple accounts within the one main account, but it shows all the income coming in and out of that account because you can get separate debit cards for each project. Something to think about. So in other words, if you're a record label and you're signing multiple artists, perhaps you want a debit card for each artist so that when you're spending money on that particular artist, it goes into that account, and any income that comes for that artist goes into that same account. And therefore, when the artist requests that they audit you, you are available to show them right off the bat, here's my income, here's my expenses, all based on that project. Okay, and now I would recommend that you think about providing yourself as a personal service. In other words, let the people know that you're in business. You can do this by sharing your experiences through a blog or doing special classes as the expert talking about the industry. Make yourself as a go-to resource. So if someone's looking to put out a product, you can use yourself as a go-to. They come to you and say, hey, I've got a new product, I'm looking to put this out. Now at that point, you can either sign them to your record label, or you can hire yourself out as a resource and let them run with it, but they're paying you for the job. Okay, and the other thing you're going to need to do is alert the media and everybody else in the industry that you are now in business as a record label, and that you are, you've set your stone. And so you want artists to know about you, and you need to let others know about you. Now, if you're just a vanity label, meaning that you're only putting out your own material, that's a vanity label. You don't necessarily need to let everybody know that you're a record label in business trying to do this. However, this is you want multiple income sources. You want your record label to be successful. Many artists who form their own record label end up signing another artist to work with them on their record label. You do need to register your record label with all the search engines. So depending on how someone's going to search for you, whether it's Yahoo or Bing or Google or any of those, make sure you're registered with all those search engines so that you can be found. Certainly review, revise, and improve every time you can. Make things better. And now you're going to have to think about the contracts that you're going to have. Okay, so if you're running a vanity record label, and let's say you are a solo artist or a band, I would recommend that you sign a contract between the record label and the solo artist, or the record label and the band. Because if you ever do sell the record label, like I did with Play Records, if you were ever to sell the record label, the contracts are in place. They're already there. Now, yes, at the beginning, you'll be signing a contract with yourself, but this is so that you don't have to look behind you when the opportunity arises. So you got to have contracts that are ready and available, and then make sure that they're okayed with your attorney. And then just remember, the contracts then can be on your computer system so that if you need to print them out, you've got them ready to go. And yes, they are all negotiable, and that will certainly come into play, but these are things that you're going to need to think about. So the contracts are in written form. The contract strengthens the bond between the owner of the record label and the artist. A contract must contain the percentage of profit sharing, royalties, ownership rights, and also promotional guarantees. Both the parties clearly agree to the service that's going to be provided. Also have to think about a music license. The record label has to obtain a music license to safeguard its music album from duplicating by the competitors. Only after obtaining a music license, the record label can sell music in the market and protect it from copyright infringement. So the license might be the copyright of the P-Circle copyright. You get it through the U.S. Copyright Office. And then you might be able to also license the music, since you're going to be developing this within your own record label, that you're going to have a business license in order to make this work. Number 3, distribution license. The main purpose of starting a record label is to distribute the music album or single. For this, the particular record label has to secure a distribution license for selling the records in outlets. For this distribution, the brand has to seek both physical and digital distribution. Once again, since we're going with a digital record label, you're going to think about digital distribution. And sample clearance certificate. As an owner of a record label, he or she has to provide sample music. For that, he or she has to obtain a sample clearance certificate from the publisher of the composer to record the samples. It's necessary to sign an agreement with the music publisher or the composer if you are set to use those samples in the mainstream medium other than the purpose mentioned in the agreement. In other words, you're going to need a music license, which is the mechanical royalty license that you're going to pay to the publisher or the songwriter. Hopefully, the songwriter has a music publisher, and then you'll deal with the music publisher. They will issue you a license for the use of that copyrighted material. That's a C-Circle copyright. And that way, when you do the recording, you can report to them how many are being replicated, because that's what you're paying on. And for anything under 5 minutes, it's 9.1 cents per song per replication. And that was increased by the Trump administration, but it's gradual, and it will be going up to 14.1 cents per song per replication over the next few years. So that is something that you have to have, is a license to use the music for a recording. If you're a vanity label and you own your own music and you're the songwriter and you're recording your own music, I would recommend that you have a contract with yourself, once again, for the mechanical license of the music. Okay? And what about producers that are working with you? If the label is produced by an outsider, then the agreement should be signed between the record label owner and the producer, stating the cost of the recording session, the advances made, and also about the royalties. Along with that, the agreement must mention that the credits will be given to the producer either in the beginning or at the end of the album. Producers typically make 2 to 4% of the manufacturer's suggested retail price, the MSRP. So you'll be paying the producer a royalty from the record label for each record sold. Artist royalties to the recording artist, but you'll also be paying producer royalties to the producer. And then as far as permission forms, I already mentioned the mechanical license. That's a permission from the publisher granting the record label permission to record the song. The record label owner has to get a liability release form from or permission letter from the concerned person. If an image of an individual outside the group is portrayed, or the work you use is already owned by someone, or the logos or slogans used by you already exist, you're going to need to get a permission form. In these scenarios, the owner has to get authorization from the concerned person. In other words, if you're going to sign an artist to your record label, part of the clauses that you're going to have in your agreement is that you're going to be able to use their likeness, their voice, their photographs, maybe their logos, in order for you to put out product. And your copyright and trademark certificates. Before the record label starts to distribute the music, it has to file for the copyrights of the recordings. Okay, so both for the original and the cover score, the information about the usage of the song along with the copyright notices should be obtained. If the credits are not given properly for each song, it will lead to copyright infringement. So you need to make sure that you have the right to use those C-Circle copyrights on your recording, but then you're going to need to make sure that you can copyright your recording on top of it all. And you're going to use the SR form with the Copyright Office. That's for sound recordings. Okay. Use the form PA for an original song on the record, or a VA if you want the artwork. The name, logo, and slogan of the record label should be filed for a trademark for getting a separate identity and enjoy the legal rights. So just like an artist has to have a trademark on their name, a record label should have a trademark on its name. That means you. Insurance. Usually the owner has to be insured for various purposes, as he or she tends to face many unforeseen situations. The record label owner has to ensure that the record label covers general insurance of the company, health insurance of the employees, liability insurance to protect them from creditors, and then if there are any overhead expenses, the insurance bears those expenses, and business owner policy, group insurance. So you need to make sure that the company is insured to avoid any problems from creditors and other instances of damages. It's kind of a little perplexed there, but are there questions about forming a record label?